Okay, I'm back with you here now. I've been doing a little bit of putzing after a lot of running around, and I got a spindle on there now, and I marked just for my own reference the way that the flywheel turns. Um, I also cut the housing. Now I cut it using a grinder with a cutoff wheel, and basically we just cut this crap all off and made it so that there's a bit of a guard, because once it sits down over the tire of the scooter, you see, it'll be covered so that if something happens to fall out of a pocket or something, it won't get messed up in there. So basically, let me go over what I did here other than the cutting bit, which I drew a line with a marker and just followed it around, and then went back and tweaked it a little here and there and placed it kind of near the frame and all that as to where I want to eventually have this motor mounted, and there it sits. So I had to go to 3 stores to get what I need. You remember we took this thing off that held the mechanism all together underneath of it? Well, right on it, it says 3/8 24. That's the thread for that particular female part right there. So the thread on the shaft that's down inside there is a 3/8 24. 24 is the thread spacing, if you will. You can get all kinds of them, and they're marked. When you go to buy them, they're marked. So I went to 2 Home Depots, a Lowe's, a Canadian Tire, a Home Hardware. Anyway, nobody had any. So somebody must be building a lot of these things. Haha. Anyway, I finally found one at Lowe's, but it isn't the lock nut I was looking for. The lock nut I was looking for has the nylon insert. So what I did was I picked up a lock washer, and then I put the whole mess together. So with this particular peg, because it's one of those funky BMX pegs that you put on the axle shaft, front axle and rear axle of your bicycle, to have front and rear pegs. The bottom end of it, or one end of it, has a steel plate welded into it with a hole drilled in it. And the one I got was a universal fit, so it fits 2 different size axle shafts, if you will. But they also give you an inside sleeve in case your axle shaft is the small size, so that it's not wobbling on the axle. Well, that axle sleeve is it must be metric, it's ever so slightly larger than the 3/8 shaft that is coming out of the motor. So I put that on, then I slid the foot peg over top of it, and then on top of that I put a washer. I went and bought a 3/8 inch washer that fit inside of the peg, so this diameter. So then I slipped that on. Now when you take this thing all apart, you'll notice that there's a stainless steel sleeve that runs over top of that washer. Over top of the drive shaft that's on the weed whacker when you get it. Save that sleeve, okay? Now, I took that sleeve off and I put it on the bench, and using my same cutoff wheel, I shortened it. And the reason I shortened it was to give me the space with my build-up of that welded steel plate on the bottom of the peg and the washer on the bottom of the peg. Then the sleeve will drop in. Then I need space on the top for a washer, a lock washer, and the nut. And I need to be able to tighten it down good and tight with a little bit of thread lock on there so it doesn't vibrate loose, and tighten it all up and have enough meat on the nut and the shaft to hold it. So you can see I'm sticking out there, so I'm all good. But you can kind of see down there, I guess, what it looks like. There's the washer, then a lock washer on top of that, and then my nut. So really and truly the peg is being held on by that sleeve and the compression between the 2 washers of that sleeve, with the nut on the end holding it on. So that's that. So I finally got that figured out. Now the other issue I have, as I said before, I've made 7 or 8 of these, but they redesigned the motor since. So what else I had to do was inside, when you take it all apart, you'll see these little guys. And they're mounted to the end of the flywheel. And they have little springs on them, of which I don't know where mine have gone. They must have gone flying. Oh no, there's one. Okay, hang on. They have a little spring here, and they're spring loaded. And what those are is that's the spring locking mechanism for the pull start. So it allows, when you pull it normally, it'll engage the flywheel and allow you to start it. Well, we don't need those because this is a friction start. So when you start rolling the scooter, it will start itself, and when you stop, it will stall it due to friction. So I got the grinder out again, and I cut them off. Reason being, because my peg is too wide. So you'll see I cut off that one, and it's just a stamped in plug. So I cut the head off it, and the whole thing came off. Then I did the same on the other side. Then when I came back with my peg, I realized it was a greater diameter than this flare part here would allow, so I cut the edge off the flare as well. And then when I put it all together, I was very careful to center it, because you can see right there the base of the peg, and I was careful to center it on the other side. Let me see if I can turn this well, so that it's pretty much in the center, because otherwise you'll have vibration up and down because it's not dead center, because there is, as I say, a millimeter or so of play in there. So you just want to take your time and try and get it as close to center as possible. Then again, you know, put a screwdriver into the flywheel and wedge it tight. Put a socket on an extension down there, tighten her up good and tight, put some thread lock on the thread, and you should be good to go. And the other thing I did was, as I say, they've changed the motors and the screw mounts for the casings and all that, because what I do is I use the screw mount for the casing to mount the motor to the scooter. So what I've done, what I've had to do, is I cut a slit in the side of the engine case here, and that's where my flat piece of steel is going to go in. There's a screw there, and then there's a screw down here. So I'll slide my piece of steel in, and of course it's going to be running across here on a bit of an angle. So what I'll do is I'll use my cutoff wheel and I'll cut an arc into the side of the steel, so that I got the center, the meat of the steel running through the motor mounts, if you will, let's call them that. So I got the center, the meat of it, the best part of it, running through, and then I'll just cut off the side, which will allow the flywheel to turn, because the steel will be inside of this case here, ever so slightly. So I got to go get my steel and figure out that positioning, and then I'll come back and do that. But that's kind of where I'm at. And the wonderful thing is, of course, if you're careful, you can save all of these parts. Like you can save the arm, the arm for the weed whacker, and the unit. You know, take the string off and use it for your weed whacker at home. But you can save that, you can save the pull start spring mechanism and all that, and you can go to your local small engine mechanic and, I don't know, maybe give them those parts for nothing and see if you can work out a deal where you can maybe trade them for a tune-up on your lawnmower or something next spring, whatever. But for no other reason, recycle them, give them to somebody who's actually going to put use to them. You know, you got this brand spanking new cutoff deflector for the front. You got this mechanism, you know, the whole shebang. Give it to somebody and that works on these things for other people, and recycle it. And ask for nothing, but maybe ask for a spark plug or a tune-up or, you know, something in exchange. And but the important part, as I say, is to recycle it. So anyhow, I will be back once I get my steel together and figure out what I'm doing with that, because the angles have changed and the position has changed. So I got to do some thinking, and I won't waste your time with that. I'll come back and show you what I found. I'll be back. Ciao.